Okay, the start of what's left of the history of Alexander by Quintus Curtius Rufus starts at Book 3. Interhec. Amongst these things, Alexander, having Misso, sent Cleandra for the purpose of hiring conducting militem soldiers from the Peloponnese, cum pecunia, with money. Having settled things, Blative Absolute, at Lycia and Pamphylia, he had moved his exercetum. He moved his army to the city Callianae. Media, something's in the middle. Illa Tempestate. At that time, it was Media Moena. These are city walls. So it looks like in the middle of this city, there was flowing through it, the river Marsyas, which is a very fabulosus, or in stories, a fabled a river of the Greeks, and it was Inclytus, so it was famous. So Emnus as male, going with the Inclytus. It's famous in Carminibuses, in songs. The Fonzius, the spring or fountainhead of it, from the Samo Kaku mine, from the very top peaks of the mountains, Montes, would, present participle or next current, it would run down or out into a petram, which is a rock, and sub means under. So underneath this, where it would run out, there's a rock with a great strepitus, with a great noise of water, aquarum, and it would cater that it would fall while it was running. Then, or henceforth, it would irrigate the plains, irrigate the campuses, having a circumjectos, which are all around, which are lying all around these plains. The water's diffusus, it's spread out, it's liquidus, it's clear, and it was trahans, it was dragging its own uders, its own water. Dum taxit probably means merely here, it would carry merely its own waters. Itaque, and so accordingly, colour eos, its colour, similar to a placid sea, Mara is that neuter ice-stem thing. It would fecit, it made a locum, a place for the poets who are mendacious, they invent things. Quippy, since, so we made a place for these inventions of the poets. It's tradition or handed down that nymphs are retained by their amorumness, by their love of the river in Ilarup, in this Petra up here. Roop's another word for a rock. These are nymphs considerae, it's the infinitive from Trado. So the nymphs sit here on this rock. Ceterum, another way of saying but, quam dui, for as long as it flows inside these murises, these walls, its name, nomen suum, it retains. But when outside these fortifications, these munimenta, it evolves itself, it rolls out itself with a major V, with more force and mole, mass, agentum, being driven, they call it, appellant, the lycus. This is the water. Alexander, got a clause here, with by that comma, he entered, quidem indeed, this destitute, deserted urbem, the city which had been deserted by its people at Aesuus, but the citadel, the archem, into which configurant they had fled, he was rising up to oppugni or besiege it, and he premised it. He sent in ahead a caducator, which is a type of herald with a stick, who would denunciate, who would announce that unless they surrendered, dead errant, passurus, it's a future, they would suffer, ipsos themselves, the very ultimate sort of punishment. And this is all in Phrygia. Caducator, male noun, a herald bearing a staff, the caducus, sent by non-Roman generals. That's an example also in Livy. Or it could be a priest servant. It wouldn't be a servant of the priest though. Where were we? Eli, they, into a turret, into a tower, they peduct them. They led, and is this in apposition with, a caducator, this herald, and etnet correlatives, both by its sight and by the work, opere, it was editem, it was high, multum, very much. So naturally, and also with these works, it was a very high sort of archem, citadel. Quanta is set in altitude. How altitude it was, how high it was, they ubeted him to gaze upon, to interi, and tenantia, to announce to the dative Alexander that not the same between himself and the Incolas, the inhabitants, that they measure out in estimation of munimenta of how fortified it was. So they're trying to prove that it was beyond Alexander's reach, I'm guessing. Say skirat, well, that would have to be a plural, so we'll just go with scary. They knew that this turret and fortification up on the hill was impregnable. It couldn't be besieged. And Mauritius, they were willing to die for their faith or their belief in it to the ultimum, to the last man. Keterum. But as Viderunt, looks like, as they saw their archem, their citadel being circumsederated, that was all set upon all around it, and omnia, everything Sibi for them, in dies from day to day was becoming arterial, becoming more in the narrows and in straits of their food or whatever was coming in, I guess. Pacti, so they made a pact of 60 days in duvitas, which is a truce, and that unless inside of these days Darius the nominative himself would have sent any auxiliary or help, then if that didn't happen because of the Nisi, they would deterrent the city. They would surrender the city. Postquem. So afterwards, and nothing then was mitabatod, was sent of any help to them in their defence, to that pre-situated date, that day that was set up in advance. They basically gave the city over to the king, per misere. So this per misere is one of those shortened ones. It's common for the third person plural. So they permitted themselves to go over to the king. It's that shortened thing you see a lot. Superveniunt, oftentimes used for an unexpected arrival, but sometimes it can just be a normal arrival. Sardinde. Next, they arrived the legati of the Athenians. That's the delegates or the embassies, and they were present participating. They were seeking that the captives at the Granicum River be rederunted back to themselves, be returned to them. Ili, Alexander, not these modo only, but even the Keteros Grekos, the rest of the Greeks, he responded. He would usurum, he would order to be restored to their people at the finito persico bello, at the end of the Persian War. Keterum, another but or yet, Darius was imminent, he was threatening, he was overhanging, whom he cognoverat, he had known, had not yet, non dum superasse, he had not overcome the Euphrates, which is river, so he contracted undiqui from everywhere, all these copias, all these forces, with so many men, totus men, he would go to Adituras, he would be approaching or attacking or taking on this discrimin, this turning point of such a war, of the upcoming thing, that's the future. Phrygia erat. It was Phrygia through which, per quam, his army, Ducabator, was led, with more vicus, more villages than urbibuses, the cities it was crowded or frequented with. Then it had that noble, quondam, once upon a time, that noble regiam of Midas. It once had that it was the noble kingdom of Midas. The name of the city is Gordium. So, the Sangarius River, Prater Fluid, flows past at an equal interval from the what's it called in English? Ponticus and the Silico Maris Distandum. So, the distance at an equal interval between both of these seas. Is that the Pontus Sea or something? What do they call that in English? Pontic. The Pontic and Cilician Sea. So amongst these, into these, is the most, or angustus, the most narrowness, spartium, space. So actually that goes together. Amongst or between these seas is the most narrow space of Asia Comparamus we've discovered. Utraque on both sides, compelling, so it's compelled or forced into artes forces, into the narrow jaws. So the land is pushed together into its narrowest space, you might want to say. So this is the present participle ablative. So it's been done by the compelling or the pushing in of the land into these narrow spaces. Quia, because it sticks to the continents or the mainland, but from the main part it is kingeted or hemmed in by fluctibus, by waves of the ocean. It prebets, it offers the appearance of an island, and unless it albicate, it casts up this tenue discrimum, this narrow joining point, besides being a discrim as a crisis and a turning point. It's obviously where two things meet as well. It's another definition of it. It's a very flexible sort of noun, which now divides the seas. So unless it did this, it would commiserate, it would join these. So it's saying, gives the appearance of an island, but really it's not.